This video is sponsored by Card Kingdom. If you want Magic singles or sealed product, use my link in the description. Hi everyone, I'm Nitsahone, and with this video I'm continuing my Avatar The Last Airbender set review. I've already looked at the multicolored and colorless cards, and today we're continuing with a look at the white ones. For each of these cards, I'll discuss how I think they'll perform in Limited, that means draft and sealed, and I'll punctuate each evaluation with a letter grade. If you're new to my set reviews and unsure of what my letter grades mean, you can find a guide in the description for this video. There are a few important things to keep in mind as I review these cards. First, because we're only talking about draft and sealed, I'm only going to be talking about cards that can be found in play boosters. This set has lots of supplementary products that have cards that won't be showing up at all in play boosters, like cards from the Eternal Legal set. So if there's a card that you think is missing from this video, it's probably not in play boosters. There is a bonus sheet in play boosters, but it's super rare, appearing in 1 in 25 packs, so I'm not going to get around to addressing them until I've covered the main set. Second, these are of course my evaluations of these cards before playing the new limited format, because my goal is to have this set review ready for you in time for the pre-release, and that means I'll be wrong about some things, but as the format comes into focus, I'll be doing videos where I discuss how things have panned out. Lastly, I want to let you know that there are some set review related perks for being a channel member or a patron. You get access to my ongoing set notes during preview season, and you'll also get a spreadsheet with all of my grades once the set review is complete. If those perks interest you, check out the description where you can find out how to support the channel using one of those methods. Alright, without further ado, let's dive in with a look at the white cards in Avatar The Last Airbender. First up, it's Aang, The Last Airbender, which for 3 generic and a white is a 3/2 legendary human avatar ally at uncommon. It's got flying, and when it enters, you airbend up to one other target non-land permanent. That means it gets exiled, and while it's exiled, its owner may cast it for 2 generic rather than its mana cost. And whenever you cast a lesson spell, Aang gains lifelink until end of turn. I think the interest trigger here is pretty good. It can get a creature out of the way temporarily or permanently if it's a token, but airbending can also be used to recast your own non-land permanent, which is worth doing for interest triggers and the like. It just seems like it will do something meaningful often enough that you'll be happy with that value on a 3/2 flyer that has lifelink on occasion. There will still be enough situations where the interest trigger doesn't do enough though, and the stat line is bad enough here that it's going to be a problem sometimes. Like, there are 1 mana cards in the set that can deal with this creature, and that can be a problem, but I'm giving this a C+. Next up, it's Aang's Iceberg, which for 2 generic and a white is a rare enchantment with flash. When it enters, you exile up to 1 other target non-land permanent until this enchantment leaves the battlefield. You can waterbend for 3 generic, and that means while paying this cost, you can tap artifacts and creatures to help, and each one pays for 1 generic. And you sacrifice this enchantment, and if you do, you scry 2. Instant Speed Oblivion Ring is an incredible card, and this even has upside beyond that since you can sacrifice it to scry. That'll be more useful when you use it on your own creature to save it for removal, which this has a mode that can do that thanks to being instant speed. So this already super premium removal spell has this whole other mode that's really good in the right spot, so it's a B+. Next up, it's Airbender Ascension, which for 1 generic and a white is a rare enchantment. When it enters, you airbend up to 1 target creature. Whenever a creature you control enters, put a quest counter on this enchantment. At the beginning of your end step, if this enchantment has 4 or more quest counters on it, exile up to 1 target creature you control, then return it to the battlefield under its owner's control. So 2 mana to airbend something doesn't seem great. Like, I like the effect, but when it's the main effect or the only effect a card has, it's a lot less impressive. Especially at sorcery speed, and especially when you can only hit creatures. Because it's not really worth a whole card most of the time. It can give you a bit of tempo by getting a blocker out of the way or something like that. It can help you rebuy an interest trigger, but most of the time, those aren't things that are worth an entire card on their own. So what you're really relying on here is ultimately managing to get 4 counters on this, which is doable. I mean, if you play this on turn 2, there's a good chance you get there because you're just going to play creatures. But then the problem is you need a creature where it's relevant for you to exile it and return it to the battlefield, and that's not going to line up all that often either. So everything this card does is a little too finicky to be very good and limited. I think it's just a D. Next up, it's Airbender's Reversal, which for 1 generic and a white is an uncommon instant lesson. You can choose one, destroy target attacking creature, or airbend target creature you control. So just the removal mode here is usually a playable, albeit narrow form of removal because it's so cheap. The fact that this can double as an airbending effect is great, as you can use it to dodge removal and the like, or get an opposing creature out of the way, like I said a moment ago. This gets around one of the usual problems this kind of removal spells has too, which is that normally they aren't very good in aggro decks, as you want removal that can hit blockers, and giving this the airbend mode means even aggro decks can turn this into a way to press an advantage, while it still remains really, really good in slower, more defensive decks that like to destroy opposing creatures for only 2 mana. I still don't think it's quite premium, it is restricted enough. Being a lesson does help a little bit, but I still think it's just a C+. Next up, it's Airbending Lesson, which for 2 generic and a white is a common instant lesson. That is airbend target non-land permanent and draw a card. So again, this is nicely flexible, and adding a draw a card effect to this is a big deal. A moment ago I said airbending alone is not really worth a whole card. Well, drawing a card is, and when you're adding that to this effect, I think you have a perfectly solid card. There's just a lot you can do with this in a lot of different situations when it's an instant and when it can hit any non-land permanent, so I'm giving it a C. Next up, it's Appa, Loyal Sky Bison, which for 4 generic and 2 white is a 4/4 legendary Bison ally at uncommon. It's got flying, and when it enters or attacks, you have 2 choices. Target creature you control can gain flying until end of turn, or you can airbend another target non-land permanent you control. So this stat line is bad. 6 mana 4/4 flyer, not where you want to be, but that's generally only true if the creature doesn't generate some sort of immediate value, and chances are good that this will. He can send your best creature to the air the turn he comes down so it can get in unblocked. He can airbend one of your creatures for value, although that part's going to be less good because it'll sort of subtract from your board, and chances are good you don't have the 2 mana around to just recast the thing right away. So it's mostly that first mode that will be good the turn you play him, and then on later turns you might be able to do more when he attacks by airbending something, although sending something else to the sky can also result in a lot of damage overall. I do still worry about the stat line and the fact that there are plenty of situations, if you've played with this kind of effect before, where giving one of your things flying just doesn't matter. It's just not a thing that always matters because you can't always attack, either because your opponent can block the flyer effectively, or you can't really leave yourself that defenseless on your next turn. So I think overall he's just a C. He's just a little too expensive for what he is. Next up, it's Appa, Steadfast Guardian, which for 2 generic and 2 white is a 3/4 legendary Bison ally at Mythic Rare. It's got flash and flying, and when it enters, you airbend any number of other target non-land permanents you control. And whenever you cast a spell from exile, create a 1/1 white ally creature token. A 4-mana 3/4 flash and flying, that's a card you'd pretty much always play, as it has great potential at ambush blocking and generating a 2-for-1 just with its body, by coming down and blocking a 3/3, and then you still have this creature lying around. So the fact that this can also save your creatures by blinking them, or just blink them for value because this has flash and you can untap and then recast all the things, which, oh, by the way, will also give you a bunch of ally tokens, is pretty amazing, especially when you're rebuying enters triggers or, like I said, using it to dodge a removal spell or whatever. So unsurprisingly, Mythic Rare Appa, a lot better than the uncommon Appa. I think this one's a bomb. I'm giving him an A. Next up, it's Avatar Enthusiasts, which for 2 generic and a white is a 2/2 human peasant ally at common. Whenever another ally you control enters, put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. I don't like this very much. Cards that start out as a keywordless 3 mana 2/2 that can grow when X happens haven't done well in limited in like the last 5 years. They just start too inefficiently, and even getting 1 counter on this isn't really going to feel like you're getting there, and there will be plenty of times where you never have the time to grow it and your opponent just plays more efficient creatures than you and you lose, and that's not something you want to happen. I'm giving this a D. Next up, it's Avatar's Wrath, which for 2 generic and 2 white is a rare sorcery. Choose up to 1 target creature, then airbend all other creatures. Until your next turn, your opponent can't cast spells from anywhere other than their hands. Exile Avatar's Wrath. Basically, you keep your best creature around while temporarily exiling everything else. That means your creature probably gets in for a free hit, and if you have mana left over, which you might because this is so cheap, you can recast 1 or 2 things that got airbended. Then, your opponent has a full turn where they can't cast those things that got airbended, and that's really nasty because one of the problems with all kinds of wraths is that frequently your opponent gets to rebuild their board first, and your opponent still can if they have stuff in their hand, but they are not getting access to the things that you airbended right away, which means you'll also get to untap, play the rest of your airbended things before they ever get a chance to rebuild their board. There are some situations where you can't leverage this enough, like if your opponent was significantly ahead of you, in which case it may just be a little bit of a reprieve before you lose, but I think this wins the game most of the time when you cast it on any board that's relatively developed, so I think it's a bomb. I'm giving it an A. Next up, it's Compassionate Healer, which for 1 generic and a white is a 2/2 human cleric ally at common. When it becomes tapped, you gain a life and scry 1. This reminds me a bit of the 2-mana 2/2 Pilot from Edge of Eternities, a card that ended up being pretty solid. The tap trigger isn't anything big, but it's something, and smoothing out your draws and gaining a life, while incremental, can make a difference. Obviously, it works particularly well with water bending, which gives you a way to trigger this even when it's not a very good attacker anymore, and the allied creature type itself is some upside too. This looks like a C. Next up, it's Curious Farm Animals, which for 1 white mana is a 1/1 Boar Elk Bird Ox at common, and when it dies, you gain 3 life. You can pay 2 and sack it to destroy up to 1 target artifact or enchantment. 1 mana for 3 life and a 1/1 is pretty reasonable value, and this can deal with some problematic card types when it needs to, and there are a decent number of artifacts and enchantments in the set. I'm giving it a C. Next up, it's Destined Confrontation, which for 2 generic and 2 white is an uncommon sorcery. Each player chooses any number of creatures they control with total power 4 or less, and then sacrifices all other creatures they control. This is a big splashy effect for an uncommon, but I don't think it's very good. It's hard to end up in a spot where you know this will hurt your opponent more than it hurts you. Those situations are few and far between, and it's virtually meaningless on many boards too. You're both going to kind of end up at parity at best, but it's worse than that, once again, because you're the one who cast this thing, you used up a card, and your opponent does get to rebuild before you do. So I think this is just an F. It's going to be a dead card in your hand a lot of the time where it doesn't do anything, and then the times when it is meaningful, it's still really not going to do that much for you on most boards. Next up, it's Earth Kingdom Jailer, which for 2 generic and a white is a 3/3 human soldier allied uncommon. When it enters, you exile up to 1 target artifact, creature, or enchantment an opponent controls with mana value 3 or greater until this creature leaves the battlefield. So this is way more efficient stats-wise than your typical Banisher Priest, but it's also more restrictive. You know, it can't hit cheaper things, but it can hit most things that you really do want to hit, including cards of 3 different types, and most of the time, you're going to be adding this body to the board while taking away whatever your opponent's best thing is, and that alone is an incredibly good play that wins a lot of games in Limited, or at least can turn the tide in a big way. It's also got the useful ally type. So overall, this looks like a great uncommon to me, and perhaps White's best uncommon. I'm giving it a B+. Next up, it's Earth Kingdom Protectors, which for 1 white mana is an uncommon 1/1 human soldier ally. It's got vigilance, and you can sack it to give another ally you control indestructible until end of turn. We've seen 1 mana 1/1s that can give themselves up to make something indestructible be good, and while this one is more restricted, it has plenty of stuff it can protect in this set, which is filled with allies, and vigilance doesn't hurt either, so I think it's a C. Next up, it's Enter the Avatar State, which for 1 white mana is an uncommon instant lesson. Until end of turn, target creature you control becomes an avatar in addition to its other types and gains flying, first strike, lifelink, and hexproof. This looks really good. Most 1 mana tricks that are effective against removal and are good in combat are good, and it can also just be used to send a creature to the air and swing for lethal sometimes, giving it a lot of different use cases than just, I cast this when my creature is attacking. The lesson typing and being cheap for prowess helps too. Even with all of that upside and being as cheap as it is still a trick. It's still fairly situational, but it's really efficient. It's going to give you great combat sometimes. It's going to blank removal and let you attack really well a lot of the time, but it's generally pretty hard to go above a C+ on a trick, and that's a really good grade for one. Next up, it's Fancy Footwork, which for 2 generic and a white is an uncommon instant lesson. Untap 1 or 2 target creatures. They each get +2/+2 until end of turn. So this trick is expensive to be sure, but it can generate a 2-for-1 in an ideal situation, making that cost a little more palatable. You also get pseudo-vigilance when you use it on your attackers, which is usually better than using it as a surprise when your opponent has mana untapped. The lesson upside matters too, but it's still too expensive to be like a good trick, but it is one you'll use. It can do some stuff with water bending too because it untaps your creatures, but I think it's a C-. Next up, it's Gather the White Lotus, which for 4 generic and a white is an uncommon sorcery that creates a 1/1 white ally creature token for each planes you control, and you scry 2. So if you're getting fewer than 4 tokens here, it's not going to feel like you're getting your mana's worth. And doing that is tough in your typical limited deck. It's probably a D in a deck that has like 8 or 9 planes, like your typical white-green limited deck or whatever. But if you can swing like 14 planes or even be full on mono white, it does get really good. I mean, you're going to be able to make 5 tokens with this with decent regularity in that kind of deck. But the problem is building that kind of deck isn't usually advisable and isn't going to happen that often. There are some incentives to do it, like this card, But overall, I think that makes this have a more reasonable ceiling. I think it's like a D in your typical white deck and a B- in a deck that has a lot of planes in it. Next up, it's Glider Kids, which for 2 generic and a white is a 2/3 human pilot ally. At common, it's got flying. When it enters, you scry 1. A 3-mana 2/3 flyer is like a C- these days, which is crazy because that used to be pretty good. Maybe it's a C. It's just about on rate. You know, it's okay for what you're paying. And adding scry is a relevant upgrade, so I do think this 3-mana 2/3 flyer is a C. Next up, it's Glider Staff, which for 2 generic and a white is an uncommon artifact equipment. When it enters, you airbend up to 1 target creature. Equipped creature gets +1/+1 and has flying, and you can equip it for 2 generic. So if we took away the enters trigger here, how good would this be? Not very. Sure, +1/+1 and flying can be a useful buff. It can make something attack that couldn't attack before, but paying 5 total mana for that to turn this comes down is brutal. Like, that card is probably an F or close to it just because it's so inefficient. So we do add an enters trigger here, and it's a pretty solid one. Airbending something is nice, and because you can hit your opponent's creatures or your own, it's pretty flexible. Is sorcery speed though, which does make it less flexible than some airbending effects. But even with that, I still don't feel like this is great. I mean, the airbending definitely upgrades this F, but I don't think it gets above a D+. It's just such a mediocre piece of equipment, and while the enters trigger makes sure you get something out of it, it's not enough for me to be very excited about. Next up, it's Hakoda, Selfless Commander, which for 3 generic and a white is a 3/5 legendary human warrior ally at rare. It's got vigilance. You may look at the top card of your library at any time. You may cast ally spells from the top of your library, and you can also sacrifice Hakoda, and creatures you control get +0/+5 and gain indestructible until end of turn. A 4-mana 3/5 with vigilance isn't a bad baseline, and there are enough allies around for this to get you a card off the top a decent chunk of the time, and sometimes you'll be able to even chain them together. It's also great that it can be used to protect the board when needed. I mean, if you just took away all the ally stuff and it was a 4-mana 3/5 with vigilance with this sacrifice ability, it'd still be a pretty good card that always made the cut. So once you throw in all of the ally upside, this looks like it can be incredibly strong. And I think that ceiling is pretty attainable in a lot of white decks. I'm giving it a B+, and if your deck has like 15 allies in it, it probably gets even better. Next, it's Invasion Reinforcements, which for 1 generic and a white is a 1/1 human warrior allied uncommon. It's got flash, and when it enters, you create a 1/1 white allied creature token. This kind of card always plays well. We see lots of 2-mana 1/1s with flash that make 1/1s. It's just a good rate to get 2 bodies at this speed, and the fact they're both allies and it works well with airbending and waterbending makes it extra good. I think it's a B-. Next up, it's Zhong's Deserters, which for 1 generic and a white is a 1/2 human rebel ally at common. When it enters, you put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. We've seen 2-mana 1/1s with this enters trigger be fine in the past, and this is better than that. It's a 2-mana 2/3 on its own, which is perfectly adequate, and at other points in the game, you can put the counter somewhere where it's more meaningful. The allied creature type is relevant, and again, this is a card that does something with airbending, and I think that makes this a solid common overall. I think it's a C+. Next up, it's Kyoshi Warriors, which for 3 generic and a white is a 3/3 human warrior ally at common. When it enters, you make a 1/1 white allied creature token. This is another colors by number type card. We see lots of 4-mana 3/3s that make 1/1s, and they're always solid, limited cards. This is another card that makes 2 allies, another card that's good with airbending. It's going to be hard to be upset about ever casting this, but you're also not ever going to feel like you're breaking the game wide open. It's a C+. Next up, it's the Legend of Yang Chen, which for 3 generic and 2 white is a mythic rare enchantment saga. Chapter 1 says, starting with you, each player chooses up to 1 permanent with mana value 3 or greater from among permanents your opponents control. Exile those permanents. Chapter 2 says, you may have target opponent draw 3 cards. If you do, you draw 3 cards. And Chapter 3 says, exile this saga, then return it to the battlefield transformed under your control. Comes back as Avatar Yang Chen, a 4/5 legendary avatar with flying. Whenever you cast your second spell each turn, airbend up to 1 other target non-land permanent. So that first chapter has weird wording because it's templated for multiplayer, but most limited is 1v1, and it basically means you get to choose an opponent's permanent and it gets exiled. They don't have to choose to because it says up to, so they'll just choose not to do that. So chapter 1 will always hit one thing, and because you aren't your opponent can't choose one of yours. Still, that means this gives you removal up front, and then chapter 2 lets you choose whether you want both you and your opponent to draw 3. One good thing here is that you're going to get use of your new cards first, so you're mostly at an advantage if you choose to give them those cards. And then chapter 3 gives you a threatening flyer that can airbend stuff using those extra cards you drew. So you get a ton for your mana, like all sagas, especially the ones that transform into real creatures. Basically, it's like a kind of expensive removal spell that will allow you to get rid of your opponent's best permanent, basically, up front, and then it gives you a bunch of other value, especially because you also get a creature. You're going to get at least a 2-for-1, and you're going to be ahead even if you choose to let both players draw 3. So I think this is a bomb. It is a little slow and a little expensive, but it's a bomb. I'm giving it an A-. Next up, it's Master Pyondao, which for 4 generic and a white is a 4/4 legendary human warrior ally at uncommon. It's got first strike. When it attacks, you look at the top 4 cards of your library, and you may reveal an ally equipment or lesson card from among them and put it into your hand. Put the rest in the bottom of your library in a random order. A 5-mana 4/4 is significantly below rate, and there are 2 mana cards that can kill this thing, and that's always a problem. But if you get to untap, you're almost definitely going to have an attack with a 4/4 first striker, and that trigger has a solid shot at drawing you a card. Worth mentioning, a 4/4 first strike is pretty good on defense too. The only real concern you have is really cheap removal, but I think this has enough upside to be a C+. Next up, it's Momo, Friendly Flyer, which for 1 white mana is a 1/1 legendary Lemur Bat ally. At rare, it's got flying. The first non-Lemur creature spell with flying you cast during each of your turns costs 1 generic less to cast. Whenever another creature you control with flying enters, Momo gets +1/+1 until end of turn. Momo is definitely friendly to flyers, making them cheaper, and becoming a 2/2 flyer until end of turn makes for a potent 1-drop. And I do think because white-blue is supposed to be a flying deck, you're going to be able to have 7-8 flyers in your deck without too much trouble. There will be games where you curve out with flyers and it feels insane, but not enough for this to be a really high pick. It doesn't quite do enough all on its own to be amazing. I'm giving it a C+. Next up, it's Momo, Playful Pet, which for 1 white mana is a 1/1 legendary Lemur Bat ally at uncommon with flying and vigilance. When it leaves the battlefield, you choose one. You can get a food token. You can put a +1/+1 counter on a creature you control, or you can scry 2. So I actually think the uncommon Momo is a little bit better than the rare one in Limited, because it gives you so much for the cost as a fail case. On turn 1, you can play it gets in for a few hits, and gives you a cheap flyer for the blue-white deck, a cheap creature for water bending. Also works with air bending, because you can air bend it, it'll leave the battlefield, you'll get this trigger. So it just does a whole lot for 1 mana all on its own, unlike the other Momo, which needs you to have some other flyers and stuff around to really go off. Because even if you just like attack with this a few times and then it dies, you're going to be happy with the value you got. So you get a lot for 1 mana here, and it works nicely with the formats, synergies. So I think it's a B-. Next up, it's Path to Redemption, which for 1 generic and a white is a common enchantment aura with enchant creature. Enchanted creature can't attack or block, and you can pay 5 generic and sack the aura to exile enchanted creature, create a 1/1 white ally creature token, activate only during your turn. So this is pacifism with big upside, and the downside with pacifism is often that it doesn't stop a creature that has static or activated abilities, but this gives you the opportunity to do that later in the game, not to mention you get a body out of it. When you draw this late, it's kind of like a 7-mana 1/1 that exiles target creature, and in the early game it still feels like pacifism. That is close to premium removal, but I do worry that sometimes it won't stop creatures effectively or efficiently enough in the early game. I'm starting it at a C+, but I'd like to see it be a B-. Next up, it's Rabaroo Troop, which for 3 generic and 2 white is a 3/5 rabbit kangaroo at common, and whenever a land you control enters, it gains flying until end of turn and you gain 1 life, and it has plane cycling for 2 generic. It's going to be hard for this to feel like terrible. It can help you find a planes when that's what you need, and it's a passable creature in the late game. One that can be a real threat in the air while affecting the race beyond that with life gain. I mean, a 5-mana 3/5 isn't very good, and when you're not hitting land drops, it's going to feel kind of bad. So it's certainly not great, and sometimes even hitting land drops isn't going to do much other than gain you that 1 life because you just can't attack. So this isn't ever a card that's going to feel like it's taking over the game or it's incredible, but it's never going to feel completely terrible either. It's going to make the cut a reasonable chunk of the time, giving it a C-. Next up, it's Razor Rings, which for 1 generic and a white is a common instant. It deals 4 damage to target attacking or blocking creature, and you gain life equal to the excess damage dealt this way. This is pretty restrictive between only going after attackers and blockers and only being able to kill things with 4 or less toughness, so there are going to regularly be times where you wish this could kill something, but you can't because of its limitations. The life gain upside is nice and will certainly come up from time to time. I'm giving it a C. Next up, it's Sandbender's Storm, which for 3 generic and a white is a common instant. Choose one, destroy target creature with power 4 or greater, or earthbend 3. You're not getting a very good deal with either mode, but they are at least generally better in different situations. If you need to add to your board, you'll go the earthbend route, and if your opponent has something big enough to kill with the removal mode, you can do that. Furthermore, the second mode can be used to ambush block things that have less than 4 power, sort of acting as restrictive removal itself in some situations. I still don't love this. I think the cost is too high for it to ever be a card you're really going after, and it'll frequently miss the cut. I'm giving it a D+. Next up, it's South Pole Voyager, which for 1 generic and a white is a 2/2 human scout ally at rare. When it or another ally you control enters, you gain a life. If this is the second time this ability is resolved this turn, draw a card. Incidental life gain is nice when it's on a solid body, and drawing at least 1 card with this is eminently doable in a set with lots of allies, including several we've already seen in this video at lower rarity that can single-handedly make 2 allies at the same time, which will now have cantrips added to them plus gaining 2 life, which doesn't look that hard to do overall. There will be times where this is just sort of gaining you a life here and there and it doesn't take over the game, but if you can draw even 1 card off of this, it's going to feel great, and I don't see that being all that difficult. I'm giving this a B+, has a great floor and an amazing ceiling. Next up, it's Southern Air Temple, which for 3 generic and a white is an uncommon legendary enchantment shrine. When it enters, you put X +1/+1 counters on each creature you control, where X is the number of shrines you control. Whenever another shrine you control enters, you put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. So 4 mana for a +1/+1 counter on all of your creatures, not great. You have to have at least 3 creatures in play for that to feel like you got a good deal. And while that's doable, it's far from automatic. And while this might give more counters sometimes when it comes down and after it comes down, I have some serious concerns about that because all of the shrines in this set have really bad baselines, and that always makes building around them a lot harder when they aren't kind of adequate, at least when you cast them normally. Like, this effect is more meaningful than some of the other ones we're going to see in this set review, but I still don't think it's great on its own, and so building around them gets to be really difficult. They're also uncommons. There are a few cards in the set that can help you find shrines a little bit easier, but I'm super skeptical that that's going to be a successful build-around strategy in the format, so I'm giving it a D. Next up, it's Suki, Courageous Rescuer, which for 1 generic and 2 white is a 2/4 human warrior ally at rare. Other creatures you control get +1/+0. Whenever another permanent you control leaves the battlefield during your turn, create a 1/1 white ally creature token. This ability triggers only once each turn. So this augments your board immediately with that stats boost, and it also makes it so that any trade you make will give you a 1/1. It works with stuff leaving your board too, like with airbending. Basically, this pressures your opponent in a big way while simultaneously making trades bad for them. Although, keep in mind, you only get the token if it's your turn. So that does make it a little bit worse. Still, I think it's a B+. Next up, it's Team Avatar, which for 2 generic and a white is an uncommon enchantment. Whenever a creature you control attacks alone, it gets +X/+X until end of turn, where X is the number of creatures you control. You can pay 2 generic and a white and discard it, and it deals damage equal to the number of creatures you control to target creature. The removal mode here really saves this card because the whole attack alone thing isn't something I'm interested in like 95% of the time. Typically, when you've got a board full of creatures, which you need for that trigger to be good, you're probably better off attacking with more than one, and that's why a card like this can be super awkward. Maybe it gets a little more interesting in a set with waterbending where you may tap your creatures for other purposes and then still have one attacker who can get in for a great attack, but overall it's still an awkward mode. By adding the discard mode here, you get an adequate, albeit sometimes underpowered, removal spell for that 95% of the time, while still being able to deploy this when you have like one huge flying creature or a lifelinker or something, and giving it a huge buff does matter. All in all, it probably still comes out as a C because the attacks alone card is too narrow and probably unplayable, and the removal mode itself is probably like a C. Next up, it's United Front, which for X and 2 white mana is a mythic rare sorcery. Create X 1/1 white ally creature tokens, then put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. So as long as you pay 2 or more for X, you end up getting a really good deal here. That's 2 2/2s for 4, and the more you pump into X thereafter, the more you get. And that's only if the board is completely empty of other creatures, in which case it gets even better because it buffs all of them. I mean, paying 5 total mana gives you 3 2/2s, 6 gives you 4. So basically what we're talking about here is the fail case, where the board is empty, and it's going to get a lot better than that. There are going to be times where you just buff your whole board for 2 white mana sometimes because that's the best play. So yeah, this is a bomb. Casting it will end a whole lot of games. I'm giving it an A. Next up, it's Vengeful Villagers, which for 3 generic and a white is a 3/3 human citizen at uncommon. When it attacks, you choose target creature an opponent controls, tap it, then you may sack an artifact or creature. If you do, put a stun counter on the chosen creature. This doesn't look very good to me. It has ugly stats and an ability that isn't that meaningful. Sure, stunning something can really alter combat, but you have to have something worth giving up to really stun the creature. Otherwise, you're just tapping it, which is a lot worse. Like if this were a 4-mana 3/3 and we simplified the text box so it says when this attacks, tap target creature, that wouldn't be good. And that's mostly what this is. Occasionally, you'll also get a stun counter out of it, but that doesn't really move the needle for me. This just looks really inefficient and really underpowered for what it costs. I'm giving it a D. Next up, it's Water Tribe Captain, which for 2 generic and a white is a 3/3 human soldier ally at common. You can pay 5 generic, and creatures you control get +1/+1 until end of turn. We've seen a lot of creatures with solid stats and a mass pump activated ability, and they almost always play reasonably well. It's just nice to be able to curve out with it, and then later in the game, threaten to give your huge board and then later in the game, threaten to give your board a huge bonus, which is often good in white because white decks often like to go wide. And with firebending in the set, this might even be more accessible than usual, provided you're pairing it with one of the colors that has a significant amount of firebending, like black or red. I'm giving this a C+. Next up, it's Water Tribe Rallier, which for 1 generic and white is a 2/2 human soldier ally at uncommon. It's got Water Bend for 5 generic, and you look at the top 4 cards of your library, and you can reveal a creature card with power 3 or less from among them, and put it into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. So this is another card we've seen lots of iterations of before, and they tend to play really well. You can play them on turn 2 as a solid creature, and then later in the game they have an activated ability that can build you a huge advantage because you can start drawing cards, and this will be even easier to do because of water bending. You're not always going to get a hit when you look at your top 4, but in most white decks you're going to do it often enough, and this ability will just win you the game sometimes if this creature comes down late or is allowed to stick around after coming down early. I'm giving it a B-. And our last white card is Yip Yip, which for 1 white mana is a common instant lesson. Target creature you control gets +2/+2 until end of turn. If that creature is an ally, it also gains flying until end of turn. So this is a decent trick. Being so cheap means that it will help your creature win combat pretty efficiently, and you do have flying upside, which can matter when you're trying to find lethal. Lesson is a big enough theme in the set that I think that this makes it to a C. It would probably be a C- without it. It also doesn't hurt that casting non-creature spells matters more than usual in this set too. So those are all the white cards in Avatar: The Last Airbender. In the next video, I'll look at all the blue ones. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like it and share it so that others can enjoy it too. If you want to catch future videos in the set review, don't forget to subscribe. And if you want to catch up on the past videos in this set review, you should see a playlist on your screen shortly. Thanks for watching.